Hello. This is the story of how customer experience in American domestic air travel saved British industry. Now then, I'm going to tell this story as a bit of a shaggy dog, so we're going to go right back to the early 1900s. And this story is particularly close to my heart because my great uncle, Sir Arnold Hall, is the person who made the decision that made this happen. Welcome to Talking Experience Analytics with a decent beer in a drawing room. And this is Brain Cake by Parrish out of Broussard, Louisiana. Oh, swamp-like. Now then, this story, as I say, is very close to my heart. And actually there's a couple of characters in here who are from our family. And the reason that I'm going to go back all the way to the 1900s is a little quirk. In fact, arguably it goes back a bit further than that. A little quirk of our family. My 5 children all have as one of their middle names a very strong character, either from our family or from history. My eldest daughter, she has Adelaide North is one of her middle names. Adelaide was a particularly rebellious member of the Hammond North Abbott clan, going all the way back to the 17th century. My younger daughter, she has Jane as one of her middle names, and Jane was her great-grandmother, a phenomenal, strong matriarch of the working class family that part of my family stemmed from up in the north, up in Darwin in Lancashire. Jane was an incredible character. My eldest son, in fact, actually, I'm going to go to my youngest son. We'll count up, meet in the middle. My youngest son has as one of his middle names, Shackleton. And this is a model of Shackleton's extraordinary expedition boat over my shoulder here. And my middle son, he had Falcon as his middle name. And Falcon was Scott of the Antarctic's middle name, a middle name his father gave him, as he said he wanted his son to have a strong animalistic element to his naming, and we chose that for very important reasons. And my eldest son, one of his middle names is Brownscombe, and Brownscombe's kind of controversial in our family because it may be part of our surname or it may be a middle name, but he has it as a middle name, and he's named after Major Hugh Brownscombe Hammond, Royal Artillery, Royal Flying Corps, RAF, who was my grandfather. And each of these characters that the boys are named after, there are companies that exist today for whom the survival, or not, as the case was with Scott, depended on these businesses. For Shackleton, he was dressed by Burberry, a highly technical expedition provider of the time who saved his life and the life of his men. Scott of the Antarctic too was also dressed by Burberry, not their fault that he froze to death. But Scott also relied on Shell, on Huntley and Palmer biscuits, Oxo. Those businesses remain today. Woolsey Wool is another business that is still here that dressed Scott. And Arthur's middle name, Brownscombe, my grandfather, well, he depended on a little company called Sopwith, who provided him with a fighter plane called the Sopwith Camel that grandfather was particularly fond of. And after the First World War, Thomas Sopwith, he folded Sopwith and started a new aviation company with a particularly daring Australian test pilot called Harry Hawker. And they formed the Hawker Company, very famous for the Hawker Hurricane, in modern times the Hawker Hunter, and various famous fighter planes. The Hawker Hurricane, only just being retired by the American Marines this year. Incredible legacy. And Hawker became Hawker-Siddeley in the early 70s or late 60s. And around that time, a particularly ambitious European aviation project took shape, Airbus. And Airbus was to involve a number of European governments in a joint effort to develop jet airliners for Europe, in an attempt, a crazy thought, to challenge Boeing. who at that point had already reached a level of ascendancy. There were a few stragglers like McDonnell Douglas. There were still a couple of British suppliers that were in the mix, and so on. There were a few of those around, but Boeing was becoming the powerful force. So Airbus planned to create this extraordinary consortium. And at almost the last minute, the British government pulled out. The British government decided, in a staggering move of lack of vision and cowardice, decided to cancel Britain's involvement in the programme, not because it thought that Britain could do its own job of a better airline industry, but because it felt that such a thing was frivolous for the country we had become. Now, the man leading Hawker-Siddeley, who at the time were responsible for the British contribution to Airbus, did an extraordinary brave thing, and that man was Sir Arnold Hall, my great uncle. And Sir Arnold, as the chairman of Hawker-Siddeley at the time, persuaded the board of the company to allow him to privately contribute to the Airbus programme, the only private company that would be part of the owning consortium. And what did Hawker-Siddeley contribute to that programme? Wings. And the wings for Airbus were special. And they were special because Hawker-Siddeley was special. Hawker understood wing technology like no other team on the planet. And what they had created with their proposed wing for Airbus's first mass transport airliner was a wing that would allow that airliner to reach service height faster than any other competing aircraft, including Boeing's. And what did that mean? That meant American airlines that ordered the new Airbus would be able to offer service, food and drink, on routes that were shorter than they'd been able to do before in North America. And so suddenly it meant that a North American airline could offer a customer experience that was genuinely something that the competition didn't have. Service on those shorter flights. And that meant that Airbus, against all odds, was able to establish itself as an airline force to be reckoned with. An airliner force to be reckoned with, rather. And that has not only persisted to today, Airbus at times overtakes Boeing in terms of deliveries and orders. They are absolutely on a par and chasing each other extremely hard. And where are the wings for all of Airbus's output made? In the United Kingdom. They're made in North Wales, they're made in Belfast, and there is a centre of excellence just outside Bristol in Filton. And that centre of excellence, incidentally, is still the greatest concentration of aviation engineering skills and talent anywhere in Northern Europe, which is extraordinary. It's extraordinary given that we don't make aeroplanes ourselves anymore. That's something we lost. But Sir Arnold Hall made a decision based on an opportunity that he understood, which was to give American airlines, not American Airlines itself, but airlines in America, an opportunity to do something extraordinary for their customers that their rivals couldn't do. And that data enabled him to make an extraordinarily brave decision. A decision, the legacy of which, and this is where I'll come to the headline of the story, the legacy of this decision is that because of that retaining of British engineering involvement, the largest concentration in any one particular company of manufacturing jobs in the UK is Airbus in North Wales. 12,000 people in that one factory. There's nothing else that comes close. Airbus in total employs 77,000 manufacturing workers in the UK, which is extraordinary and only still exists because of a decision to service a better customer experience in North America. Now, that led all the way from my grandfather flying Sopwith Camel aircraft in 1917, I think the first deliveries were, to Thomas Sopwith and Henry Hawker creating Hawker Aviation in 1920, And that still exists in legacy because Americans want to eat. Cheers, everybody. Sleep safe. Sir Arnold Hall.